Alright guys, we're back with the engine build of the Pops Fiero. Here we're looking at the alternator that I just painted and all the detail work that I put into that, and next we're going to look at it next to my finger so you can get a good idea of the size of this thing. Now you can see the completed engine block and the alternator belt drive assembly, which we will be attaching right to the engine block with a fabricated bracket that we're making just for the alternator. Now, a pet peeve of mine is when these kits bring alternators and AC compressors that just hang in midair. It just really bugs me. So I decided just to make my own brackets for both. We're continuing with the engine detailing and modification. These strange little objects, there we go, there's in focus, that you can see here are the mounting brackets for the alternator, which is this one here. I came to a close approximation of it, just to kind of give a hint of what it looks like. It's kind of tough in this scale to get it exact, but those of us who own Fieros will recognize this shape. And the other bracket is our, well, there we go, air conditioning bracket. Not exact, I know, but close enough that it'll look good in the model once the engine is all built and mounted up. Made this one from this is a 3-piece bracket, as it uses a small bit of photo etch for the small tab that goes on the back of the compressor, and 2-piece photo edge, 2-piece styrene from sheets I have, from the styrene sheets I have. One for the large tab, which mounts to the engine block, and the other one for the body of the bracket, which attaches the 2 tabs together and holds the AC compressor. Now, the alternator bracket I made by taking a piece of styrene and cutting it. This is a 2-piece, actually a 3-piece bracket, as I had to make it a spacer, as the alternator extends a little further out from the block and a little further forward, so I had to make a spacer just like the real bracket has in order to have it fit the block in the right spot where the alternator sits. Now, and focus. Now we're just going to, I got them primed up now. I'm going to be painting them with our Vallejo aluminum, mostly because I just really like that color now. Otherwise, I would have been painting them, well, I've got quite a variety of metallic colors, but I think the Vallejo aluminum is going to really look good on this. Alright guys, we'll be back with the finished product soon. After a base coat of Tamiya Gloss Black, we're now going to hit it with the Tamiya Silver. Aluminum. So hang out while we do some painting. Alright, we have the alternator bracket installed. There you can see it with its adjustable slot on the bottom there. That's all good and ready to go. Now I made a slight miscalculation with the bracket for the AC compressor, as this is the bracket that I made, but I didn't take into account the coolant holes. I was in such a hurry to make the bracket because I really enjoy making these things that I made it sit too close to the block. It's actually got to come out further, and it's got a fork toward the back instead of the front, the way you see here. Basically the reverse of what I have here, because it's going to be further out from the block, so it's going to have to reach further that way to get to the back of the AC compressor. Now I did weather the AC compressor a little bit. Kind of like the way that looks more than just the super solid clean black. And had to redo my fuel injector rail, as I'm trying to make everything fit into this tiny little engine. So now we have one bracket done. I've painted the coolant hose, and let's see if we can get that to focus. Okay, let's see if we can get it to work. Right, there we go. Here we have the coolant hose, which is done in Tamiya rubber black, which is a color I really like for painting rubber hoses. I've also painted on the clamps, going to the coolant crossover pipe and the thermostat housing with its aluminum cap. Now this is supposed to sit right there in the front of the engine, and that's where my problem starts, where I don't have enough room for the bracket. Here's a little look at the coolant hose, and this is right where it mounts in the engine. Now that's going to be right next to the AC compressor, which is going to prevent the bracket that I made from actually fitting. So it's back to the drawing board and time to fabricate something new. Alright guys, now I'm going to take you through basically the entire build of one of these little brackets that I make. First thing I do is I take a piece of sheet styrene. I cut out the general shape that I need. And now comes the fun part, where it's just a lot of trial and error fitting till I get it where I want it. Now, my issue, as I said before, is the location of the coolant hose and the crossover pipe, as they come right across the front of the engine where I need this bracket to go. So what I've got to do now is just do a little fitting here and do a little trimming so that it sits evenly with the other bracket for the alternator, and they extend basically about the same amount from the engine. So I can see here that I'm already going to have to trim just a little bit more from the back side of the bracket. Now, this looks about right. Now what I have to do is make the spacers that are going to hold this against the block, which means I'm going to have to cut small bits of the styrene and get it to hold against the block. But the first thing I'm going to do is cut this straight, because it's at an angle that I'm not really happy with. That's better. That looks a little more like a machine bracket. That would be right there. That looks pretty good. Right about there. Now it's time to just figure out what we're going to do here for the rest. Now, seeing as how I'm making this up as I go along, I think I'm going to use this bit of styrene rod to see if I can get what I'm looking for. And here we go, we have the beginnings of our bracket. Alright, now I have my new bracket. I am much happier with this one than I was with the previous one that I had made for this engine. Still have to do a little bit of work to it. But as you can see, I shaped it so that it looks like it may have been something that was built for this engine. You know, developed just for specifically for this engine. It's somewhat similar to the real bracket that the real car has. So I'm happy with the way it looks. Now I just have to add one more part to it. But let me show you exactly what I did here. This bracket here is made from 3 separate parts. The base that mounts to the block, the body of the bracket, and in the front I got a small little piece of triangle there that I think, let me give you a better look there, see if I can give you a better look. That little angled piece there, to make it look as if it's a structural support, like what would have been on a real mounting bracket, to give it a little more rigidity. So it's a 3-piece bracket there, which I think will look good once it's painted up, which is where I think we're headed to next after I attach one small part to it to finish it up. Okay, now we're going to make the final part of our bracket, which is another flange that's going to wrap down and around the compressor. If you can see here, it'll come this way and wrap down on the compressor as if it's the actual attachment point for the bracket to the compressor in the rear. So I cut this piece of photo etch from another one of my metal earth kits that I buy for Greebles. And at the same time, I managed to find a piece in here that will make a pretty good oil cap as the valve covers. One of the details they get wrong is where there's supposed to be an oil cap. There just seems to be a small nipple there, which looks almost like the nipple for the PCV valve. But here I found a piece in the metal earth kit that will make a pretty nice facsimile of the oil cap. So once that dries, I'm going to paint it black, and we have our much more realistic oil filler cap. So now I've just got to bend this into the shape that I need, and we'll have our final bracket. Now, to bend this little piece of photo etch, I will be using my photo etch bender. I did showcase this in a previous video. My build for Ukraine, in which I made a couple of parts using photo etch leftovers, and I went over how to use this. It's an ingenious little device that works fantastic for what I'm trying to do here. So what I'm going to do is take this, give it its little bend, loosen it up, and here I have my little right angle bracket for the back of the compressor bracket. Take this to the side. If you want to see more on how to use this, I go way more in depth into it on my other video for the build for Ukraine. And now this small compressor bracket will be glued to here, and it'll all be painted afterwards. So now we're going to attach a little bit of glue, and then we're going to do a little measurement to make sure it all fits the way it's supposed to. Okay, now the glue is still wet. We're going to make any adjustments we need to that little bracket so that it sits flush against the compressor. I think that is going to be perfect right there. There we go. I'll add a little more CA glue to it to hold it in place. And bam, our new compressor bracket is done. Hopefully you guys can see this if the camera's focusing properly. I also rounded off all the edges to take away that I just got cut from a sheet of styrene look. So hopefully after paint it'll look like a actual what's the word I'm looking for? An actual molded piece of molded part. As I'm really happy with the way this bracket came out. Much better than the one I did for the car, than for the build I did for myself of this car. Alright guys, time to go to paint. Okay guys, and here we have the engine so far. You can see the two mounting brackets, as were featured in this video, are the latest details to be added to the engine. And here you can see is a good look at what's going on behind the AC compressor, where you can see how the mounting bracket has a clamp that comes down around the back of the AC compressor to hold it. Okay, come on camera, cooperate. And here you can get a good look at the bracket for the alternator and all the details there, and the bracket for the AC compressor. Now you can see how I rounded off all the edges and the corners. I was trying to make it look as if it's a molded piece that could have come with the kit, but didn't. So I think I achieved that. So the engine's coming out really nicely. And I'm very happy with it. Here you can also see the thinned belts, which gives them a much more realistic appearance than the big, thick, blocky belts that they were before. Much like most belts when you buy one of these kits. But you thin the belt out and it looks much more realistic. So there we go. The Pops Fiero engine is coming together. Next we'll be adding the spark plugs and the wires, the upper plenum, and a few more details that I'm planning on adding to it, so that Greg's father will have one of the most detailed Fiero model kit engines in this small scale. Alright guys, that's going to end it for this video, as this is part 2 of the engine details, and part 3 will be coming soon, where you're going to see a lot more stuff added to this. So I hope I'm not boring you guys, but this is my favorite part of building, as here's where you get to really play and be creative and make all sorts of new things that will just enhance the kit. And for me, it's just a lot of fun. Alright, I will see you guys on the next one.